There is a motorcycle that Japan officially rated at just 77 PS, roughly 76 horsepower. The world remembers it as the bike that made 100 and never let go of that reputation. Suzuki claimed its aluminum frame weighed just 8.1 kilograms, less than half of a conventional steel frame, and a race-prepared version of it won Le Mans in its very first year on sale. It's called the Suzuki GSX-R750. And here's the strange part. It didn't invent a single major idea inside it. This is the story of how one motorcycle took technology that already existed, stripped out every ounce of unnecessary weight, and reset what a serious sport bike was supposed to be. Let's get into it. Picture the sport bike market in the early 1980s. Fast motorcycles already existed. Fared motorcycles already existed. Racing-inspired road bikes already existed. Honda's VF750F had already put a V4 engine and racing pedigree into a mainstream Japanese 750. Ducati had already been selling race-derived 750s to a smaller, more devoted crowd in Europe. And in 1984, Kawasaki dropped the GPz900R, a liquid-cooled, fully fared missile that redefined how fast a road bike could go in a straight line. So the ingredients were already sitting on the table. What nobody had done was combine them ruthlessly in one accessible, mass-produced package without compromise, because here's the quiet problem the entire industry had just learned to live with. The more power an engine made, the heavier the motorcycle got. Bigger crankcases, bigger cooling systems, bigger frames to handle the stress. That was just the cost of doing business. A fast 750 was, by definition, a heavy 750, something you muscled into a corner and wrestled back down under braking, not something that turned in on command. Ducati's own 750 Super Sport had already proven that race-derived road bikes could exist and sell, but it lived at a smaller scale, built for a narrower, more devoted crowd in Europe, not for the mainstream Japanese-dominated sport bike market. It showed the concept could work. It didn't show it could scale. Yamaha was chasing the same problem from a different angle. Their answer was a liquid-cooled 5-valve per cylinder engine with a forward-inclined cylinder layout, more performance through more advanced combustion, not through less weight. Two completely different philosophies, forming at almost exactly the same moment, aimed at exactly the same wall. Suzuki had its own GSX-R identity brewing too, as the GSX-R400 had already launched in Japan, wearing the aluminum and race-focused DNA before the 750 ever existed. But the 750 class superbike, the one riders actually cared about, was still stuck in the old formula. More power, more weight, more compromise. Nobody had proven that a 750 could hit near superbike output while staying close to what a 400 weighed. That gap between what engineers assumed was possible and what riders actually wanted is where this story begins. Quick question before we get into how Suzuki actually solved this. If you were an engineer in 1983, staring down that same wall, would you have chased more horsepower like Yamaha did, or torn weight out of the whole motorcycle like Suzuki was about to? Drop your answer in the comments. I actually want to see how the split lands. And if channels that treat motorcycle history like an actual investigation, not just spec sheet trivia, are your thing, the subscribe button is right there. There's no boardroom shouting match on the record here, no single dramatic meeting historians can point to. What actually drove the GSX-R750 was quieter. A target set by project leader Etsuo Yokuchi and Suzuki's development team years before the motorcycle ever reached a stage in Cologne. Picture that target the way an engineer inside Suzuki would have seen it. 100 horsepower, 180 kilograms, not a wish, a mandate. Say those two numbers together next to any conventional superbike of the era, and they sound almost reckless, because everyone else's math said you couldn't have both. Yokuchi wasn't a lone inventor working in secret. He led a full engineering team, and the clearest record we have comes from participant accounts describing the project's direction, not a single recorded speech. But the target itself is the scene worth remembering. Every one of the usual demands still applied: output, durability, road legality, affordability. Suzuki just added a fifth, and made it the one that overruled all the others: mass. That's the seed. Keep it in mind. because it explains almost every strange, uncomfortable choice that follows. So how do you build a 100 horsepower engine without the weight that usually comes with it? You start by asking a question most manufacturers weren't asking. Do you actually need a full liquid cooling system? Suzuki's answer was SACS, the Suzuki Advanced Cooling System. It wasn't one simple trick. It was 2 oil pumps doing different jobs. A high-volume, low-pressure pump circulated oil through the cylinder head, where fins and an external oil cooler bled off the heat. A separate high-pressure pump fed bottom-end lubrication and aimed jets directly at the underside of the pistons, the components under the most thermal stress. Why does that matter? Because instead of a full water jacket, a radiator, hoses, and a water pump, Suzuki got there with an oil cooler and a second pump. Less plumbing than a full liquid cooling system. Less weight. A different route to the same job. Aluminum frames weren't new, nobody's claiming that. But Suzuki built one from cast and extruded sections and claimed a weight of 8.1 kilograms, less than half of a comparable steel frame. Wrap a tightly packaged inline 4 inside it, add rear set foot controls, low clip-ons, and full endurance racer bodywork. And you don't just have a motorcycle that performs like a racer, you have one that's built, from the frame out, around a racer's priorities. Ask yourself, what's actually revolutionary here? Because on paper, nothing is. Oil cooling existed. Aluminum frames existed. Race-style ergonomics existed. What Suzuki was building wasn't a new part. It was an argument that if weight is the single rule every system has to obey, engine, frame, bodywork, riding position, all of it, you end up somewhere nobody else had fully committed to going. That discipline extended into the engine itself. The GSX-R750 didn't reach for an exotic V4 or an unusual valve arrangement. It used a transverse, double overhead cam inline 4, a familiar proven layout, and spent its engineering effort making that familiar engine as tight and as light as it could possibly be. Why does that matter? Because it proves the revolution wasn't exotic engineering. It was refusing to let a proven design carry 1 extra gram it didn't need. None of it came free. High output, real durability, road legality, and actual affordability all had to survive inside that same weight target. And something usually gives when you push a spec sheet that hard. Suzuki was betting riders would accept whatever gave, in exchange for something no other mainstream 750 was offering. There was no guarantee that bet would pay off. A motorcycle built around one uncompromising priority can just as easily become a motorcycle nobody wants to actually own. In 1984, Suzuki pulled the cover off the GSX-R750 at the IFMA exhibition in Cologne. There's no transcribed crowd reaction on the record, but picture the floor that day. Rows of conventional, fully dressed 750s, and then this parked right next to them. Full endurance racer bodywork, clip-ons, a visible aluminum frame. It didn't look like a road bike wearing a costume, it looked like a racer that had wandered off the track. Here's the number that should stop you. In restricted Japanese specification, the GSX-R750 was officially listed at 77 PS at 9,500 revolutions per minute, about 76 horsepower, and 179 kilograms dry. Unrestricted export versions were commonly claimed at 100 to 106 PS at around 176 kilograms. Now put it next to Suzuki's biggest domestic rival that same year. Yamaha's FZ750, same restricted Japanese spec, also made 77 PS. Yamaha's dry weight, 209 kilograms. Same power, same market rules. Suzuki's bike was carrying roughly 30 kilograms less. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between fast and genuinely light. Kawasaki's GPz900R, launched the same year, sharpens the point further. Liquid-cooled, fully fared, built to be the fastest thing on the road in a straight line. A serious, advanced motorcycle, just not one chasing minimum weight. Two completely different definitions of advanced, 12 months apart. One chased top speed, the other chased the lowest mass a road-legal 750 could carry and still function. By 1985, it was on sale in Japan and Europe. By 1986, it reached the United States, $4,499 for the standard model, $6,499 for a 500-unit limited edition. the GSX-R750R, built to tie the showroom bike directly to production racing. In the UK, early examples ran just above 3,000 pounds. Every market got the same message, in a different currency. This was a race bike Suzuki was willing to sell you, not a road bike dressed up to look like one. If you're into motorcycle history told with the actual receipts, real numbers, real qualifications, no myth-making, the subscribe button is right there. Now, the real test wasn't the spec sheet. It was whether buyers and the racetrack would back it up. They didn't ease in. Between March and December of 1985, 10 months, more than 5,700 units were registered in Japan alone. That's not gradual adoption. That's a category shifting overnight. The same year, a race-prepared GSX-R750 won the Le Mans 24-hour endurance race, and Cycle World took a different approach entirely. They pulled two essentially stock machines straight off the assembly line, sealed the engines, swapped in tires and an auxiliary fuel tank, and ran them for a full 24 hours, averaging 128.303 miles per hour. One was a tuned race bike, proving what the platform could do with help. The other was close to showroom stock, proving what it could do without it. Here's the part that's genuinely brutal and worth saying plainly. The GSX-R750 was not flawless. Contemporary reports describe nervous high-speed handling on early versions, suspension that reached its limits under hard use, and in some markets, low-speed carburation problems. The riding position was demanding by design. This was built around race priorities, not comfort. Suzuki had ripped the weight out. The suspension, the tires, the geometry still had to catch up to the performance that was left behind. Journalists at the time caught both halves of that story in the same breath, the speed and the compromise. That's not a contradiction. It's exactly what you'd expect from a motorcycle where every decision served one priority at the expense of every other one. And buyers took the deal anyway. That's the real headline here, buried under the horsepower figures. A meaningful slice of the market was suddenly willing to trade comfort and forgiveness for something closer to what a racer actually rides. The ground had shifted under the entire 750 class, and it happened in under a year. Part of why that trade made sense was production-based racing itself. Manufacturers needed road bikes that could be homologated straight into competition, and buyers increasingly wanted to own something with a direct line to the racetrack, not just a motorcycle that looked fast in a showroom. The GSX-R750 didn't create that appetite. It gave it the clearest, most convincing answer yet, and it did it while still being something you could ride to work on a Monday, however uncomfortably. Once the concept was proven, the rest of the Japanese industry didn't sit still. Through the late 1980s, Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki all pushed out increasingly specialized 750 class machines. Homologation specials built as much for racing rulebooks as for showroom sales. Honda's RC30, Yamaha's OW01, Kawasaki's ZX-R750. It's tempting to draw a straight line from Suzuki to all of it. The evidence doesn't fully back that up. Racing regulations were evolving. Tire and suspension technology was advancing on its own, and manufacturer rivalry that had nothing to do with Suzuki specifically was already pushing the category forward. What's fair to say is narrower and more interesting. The GSX-R750 became the clearest, most visible proof that this direction actually worked, that you could sell something this uncompromising in real numbers, not just to a handful of racers. And here's the twist worth sitting with. SACS, the oil cooling system that made the entire 1985 project possible, didn't last. By 1992, Suzuki had moved the GSX-R750 to liquid cooling, and the manufacturer-listed weight climbed back up. The very technology that solved Suzuki's original weight problem quietly vanished from its own motorcycle. Then look at 1996. The Strad generation GSX-R750 arrived with a modern liquid-cooled engine, a twin-beam frame, and ram air induction, and Suzuki listed its dry weight at roughly 179 kilograms, the same number, more or less, as the original 1985 machine. The cooling system that started this whole story was gone. The obsession with weight it was built to serve was still alive and well. Trace the DNA forward from there, later GSX-R 750 generations the GSX-R1100, the SRAD, eventually the GSX-R600 and GSX-R1000, and you're looking at one unbroken philosophy: power to weight over raw displacement, racing authenticity over comfort, specialization over versatility. That expectation didn't exist in quite that form before 1985. It's been baked into what serious sport bike means ever since. Suzuki backed that philosophy with more than just marketing too. In 1986, they built 500 examples of the GSX-R750R limited edition, a run small enough to matter only to the buyers who actually wanted the closest thing to a race bike with a license plate. That's not the move of a company treating the GSX-R as a one-off. It's the move of a company that had decided this was the identity going forward. The clearest proof of how far Suzuki had shifted its own priorities isn't even a competitor comparison. It's Suzuki's own earlier 750 road bikes, the conventional road-oriented machines the company was building just a few years before. Set those next to the GSX-R750, and the contrast isn't subtle. It's the difference between a company still playing by the old rules and the same company tearing them up on its own showroom floor with its own name on the tank. So go back to that quiet, unglamorous target: 100 horsepower, 180 kilograms, no exceptions. The GSX-R750 didn't invent the race replica. It didn't invent the aluminum frame, and it certainly didn't invent oil cooling. Every major piece of this motorcycle already existed somewhere else, in someone else's factory, before Suzuki ever touched it. What Suzuki actually did is harder to name and easier to miss. They made weight the one rule every part of the motorcycle had to obey, and they were willing to sell you the uncomfortable, demanding, occasionally nervous result of that discipline. That's the real revolution. Not one part, not one number. A refusal to compromise on a single idea, applied everywhere at once. Remember that average of 128 miles per hour held for 24 straight hours? Remember Le Mans? Those weren't lucky results. They were the target: 100 horsepower, 180 kilograms, finally paying off on a stopwatch in front of the entire industry. The oil cooling didn't survive. The philosophy did. And that's why, whether you're looking at a 1985 GSX-R750 or the sport bike sitting in a dealership window this year, you're still looking at Yokuchi's original bet: that riders would choose light and uncompromising over big and comfortable every single time. I cover motorcycle history and engineering stories like this every week, and the subscribe button is right there. I'll see you in the next one.